Wild Nothing Hold album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this latest album from a Virginia-based dream pop act, Wild Nothing, aka the brainchild of Mr. Jack Tatum. They've been at it since the early 2010s, and in a lot of ways, especially for me, Wild Nothing really did show up right on time in my life. This was right at the tail end of my very hazy chill wave days. I was getting into more dreamy post-punk like Beach Fossils, and Wild Nothing and their debut album Gemini just hit the spot to me. This was just my kind of very hazy, lovelorn dream pop with a little jangle pop and post-punk thrown in. It's great. It still hits for me. It still brings me back to a much simpler time, if you will. But a few years later, with 2012's Nocturne, Wild Nothing started to show some growing pains. This was a very different album. Gone were the very hazy, dreamy landscapes, and much more of this album was much more in a 80s synth pop direction. And it took me a while to kind of ease into it, which I eventually did. I also needed to get used to the different style of songwriting and the epic nature of this track. I mean, my God, that title track is a journey. Check it out. Now, with Life of Pause, their next album, I found even more mixed results, especially in the first third of the album. I thought it was really, really messy stuff. And yes, by the end of the album, I thought Jack kind of got into the groove, but still I was finding more holes in their music. If anything, I enjoyed their last album, Indigo, more. That was back in 2018. And yes, by this point, Jack was officially in full 80s aesthetic mode, almost to a fault. As a matter of fact, that's kind of why a lot of people have fallen off with Wild Nothing. A lot of Jack's music has been criticized for just, you know, being a vibe, man, being that 80s aesthetic and not much else. I mean, I thought he did it justice on Indigo. My review has kind of lessened on me over the years. I think I gave it a very strong review initially, but let me digress, because this is their first album in almost 6 years, and I've been waiting very, very patiently to hear this record. I've been amped, especially because a lot of the singles have been really good. Let's chat about this thing. This album starts off with Headlights On, featuring my girl Hatchie. I mean, instantly, give me all this you got. Ever since this dropped as a single, I loved it. I mean, is it partially nostalgia? Maybe. Do I eat 80s tinged synth pop for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Yes, I do, but I think it's a little bit more than that this time around. Jack sounds really, really focused and has upped his songwriting game in a way that I did not see coming. This is easily, this entire album, his most vulnerable and personal songs to date. All of that without shying away from the hazy aesthetic and this awesome hook. Give me all this you got, and give me all Hatchie you got. I mean, I'll take her on a guest verse any day. It's retro, it's funky, it's great. Basement El Dorado, on the other hand, takes a turn for the funky. There is some genuine synthwave on this track, and it's good. That bass riff is awesome. And not only lyrically is this one of Wild Nothing's best albums, I mean, confidence-wise, I've never heard this from Jack. And the aesthetic is still very much so here. I mean, if you on their last few albums have gotten out of the groove on Wild Nothing stuff, please give this a listen. It's punchy, it's got a groove, it's fun, and Jack's performance is just a breath of fresh air. It almost reminds me of what Alan Palomo was doing on his debut solo album earlier this year, minus the sleeves and minus the mustache. The Bodybuilder, on the other hand, has one of the more subtle starts on this album. It really does take its time, but it does open up very nicely into some very silky, steamy, 80s tinged soft rock and Sophisti-Pop as well. Clearly, Jack has been listening to his Sade recently, but it's doing him wonders. Once again, lyrically, this is a level of sincerity that I've never heard from Jack, and I commend him for it. The production all around is so slick, and if you're not into the hazy aesthetic that most of this album does have, the chorus on this track and many tracks just adds a little punch. Suburban Solutions is another flashier and funkier tune. I do really like these. This is a bright, neon-colored track with a ton of heart, a ton of passion, another very confident performance from Jack. It's really impressive. I'm not saying that he's a vocal master all of a sudden, but I will say this seems to be like the most front and center his vocals have ever been, especially his lyrics too. It's glitzy, it's groovy, it just sounds so full. I needed this. Now, I will say this, some of this album's interludes are his biggest detractors. Take, for example, Presidio. I feel like there's somewhere deep inside that my 18-year-old self is grooving out to this. And I wouldn't say it's bad, but in an album that has been nothing but growth for Jack Tatum and Wild Nothing, this just seems, I don't know, unnecessary? Especially taking into consideration it's almost 4 minutes. It's not terrible, though. It just doesn't need to be here. But Histrion, on the other hand, this track is easily the worst track here. I don't know what made Jack take a step back and say, hey, we need a really moody experimental cut. And you know what? I don't hate that idea on paper, and we're going to get to tracks like this that actually work, but this does not. The execution here is so weird. Why is this track so campy and goofy? It sticks out like a sore thumb, and Jack all of a sudden doesn't sound nearly as confident as he did. The production also, no bueno. And also, the little chaos interlude, much like Presidio, we just didn't need this. Outside of that, though, I'm very impressed with this record. For a dream pop and indie pop record from Wild Nothing in 2023, this has a lot of heart, a lot of passion, and if you've fallen off with the band, and I can understand why you would, I beg you, come on back, give this a shot. Dial tone is great. I mean, if Headlights On is the best track here, this is easily the second best track at a very slim margin. This is such a breath of fresh air for indie pop and the band. I love the drive and determination on here. It's upbeat, the synths absolutely soar, all without giving up just how potent this album has been lyrically. And it's got this sense of adventure that just, oh, I can't say no to it. Awesome track, awesome production, give it a listen. Prima is also really, really good. I mean, take this compared to Histrion earlier. This is Jack and Wild Nothing taking risks and focusing on atmosphere, but doing it the right way. It's low-key, but it's got a ton of drama. It's got layers of synths, playful keyboards too. The pacing here is divine. Jack's performance is full of heart. I didn't know that Wild Nothing had a track like this in them. It's absolutely serene, and for a more organic tune, Alex hits the spot. This is a very cinematic, heartfelt track that hits pretty hard. But as this track rolls on, it only gets more and more impressive. Those shimmering guitars that come crashing in, almost a little shoegaze influence. And not an ounce of the emotion that has been a selling point for this album has slowed down in the slightest. And Pulling Down the Moon Before You is a great finale. This is the perfect finale for an album like this. It's got that heart, it's surprisingly epic too, and at over 5 minutes, Jack really gives this track room to breathe. But none of it's wasted, it's all just built and built and built all around. Another very charismatic performance from Jack. It's a great finale. This is a really good album. I feel like all around, Jack and Wild Nothing have really stepped up this time around. You know, for years they were getting into that area of just like, is this more of an aesthetic thing? Is it just like the whole 80s retro movement thing? And that's it. I understand the complaints. I always kind of liked it. But this is bigger than anything that I thought that Jack could put out right now, because it's easily his most personal and his most revealing album lyrically. It's strong throughout. The production's great. The emotions here, the heart is big, and the charisma and the confidence within all of these performances is really commendable. It's not perfect, but it is really, 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 really good. I'm feeling a decent 8 on this new one, but let me know what you all think down below. If you like the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.